Welcome to Objectively Biased. We are finally here. This is Wilder Adams of What's on Tap NBA, and I'm alongside another show host, John Tortorelli. What's going on, man?
I'm absolutely thrilled to be here, man. This Sunday's been good. I got my Steelers playing 8:30, but today we're talking about a lot in the NBA space, and the season is just 2 days away. So I could not be more excited to be here, and honestly, I'm excited to start to work in this podcast together as well now.
Yeah, absolutely. I concur on that. But for me, Sunday is absolutely miserable now because the Vikings blew it 31-29 in embarrassing fashion. We can't get a two-point conversion. We just dumb penalties after dumb penalties. We should have won that game, and we were up 10-0, and then we fall back, and then we come back, and then field goal game winners are heartbreaking if you're on the wrong side of them. So, yeah, I'm happy to get this podcast going and just kind of forget what's happening in Minnesota sports. We lost the game, and now I have to go to school tomorrow, and people are going to trash me for it because I've let people know we're undefeated. So.
Sorry, I almost sneezed right there. This show, for those of you that are wondering, is not only going to be the two of us, but it's also going to be Riv from Pick a Side. We've worked together now for 3.5 years. And we're going to bring on a lot of guests throughout the NBA calendar year. This is going to be a weekly show we're looking to do. We're going to talk about a variety of things in the NBA. And I think altogether we can bring a lot to the table. But to start off for today's episode, I want to warm us up with some mock trades, right?
Yeah.
Recently, some reports came out that Kawni Leonard, someone who has a pretty chronic knee condition, we could say, is going to be out indefinitely. We don't know when he's going to start this season. And I think about it from the Clippers' perspective. Yeah, it makes sense to keep Kawhi if you want to sell tickets in this new Intuit Dome that you've built, which was a lot of money. But if Kawhi's not going to be available, and specifically in the playoffs, why not trade him and get your rebuild started? So, got a Kawhi Leonard mock trade. And this is going to send him to the Miami Heat. Now, it's a little bit small. I'll be able to read it for you. Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, and Nikola Jovic go into the Clippers with the first-round pick as well, top 10 protected. And the Miami Heat are going to team up Kawhi with Jimmy, Bam, and they're going to keep the majority of their cast, though they're giving away two good shooters and specifically their best shot creator after Jimmy in that lineup. But I like this deal a lot for the Heat because they can afford to loan manage Kawhi more than the Clippers because of that existing cast that they have. And then on top of that, you get Kawhi to kind of be like a 1A, 1B to Jimmy. It relieves a lot of the pressure for him to be that guy net in and net out. And I just think for Eric Spoelstra, it would be the best thing for all three parties involved. The Heat, the supporting cast, and also Kawhi to not have that pressure to really lead a team as much, but rather be that elite shot creator when you need him. Plays 50 games in the regular season, but if he gives you 75% availability in the playoffs, I think that would be the move, which takes the Miami Heat back to the NBA Finals.
Yeah, John, this is the first time I've seen this mock trade. And just to let everybody know, we're going to have a lot of fun mini series that kind of rotate week after week. And this is one of them. We're going to be very trade based in a lot of our episodes, I would assume, in the future. And looking at this trade, I think the team I like most in this deal, this might sound funny, it's kind of the Clippers. It's a little bit the Clippers. And the reason why I say that is because I think Kawhi Leonard at this point, unfortunately, I think he's burnt toast. That's just how I would say. It's really unfortunate, but he's hurt again. He was hurt during the Olympics, which is why he didn't play in the Olympics. And now you go to Miami, and they're kind of having this little youthful build, right? They're trying to get a little younger around Bam. It feels like they're trying to position for the post-Jimmy career. But this trade, it kind of abandons that outlook for a guy in Kawhi Leonard who might keep Jimmy Butler, but then can you trust the durability between these two, especially as Jimmy gets into his mid to late 30s and Kawhi hasn't played much, and you compare it to the top of the East, like the roster is still relatively incomplete and the bench is a bigger question than it is right now. We're all like, it's an okay, not great bench. So I think I have a lot more questions. I mean, the Clippers right now are the worst situation in the NBA. They're literally the Brooklyn Nets 10 years ago, but worse.
Yeah.
But they get, I would say, at least two good players, and honestly, any pick at this point for the Clippers is valuable. So Clippers aren't suddenly a great situation from this trade, but I think I like them a little more in this one.
Right. I think what it comes down to, if you're the Heat, this is the best possible player you're going to get for not an insane package. And Kawhi Leonard's trade value is something that's so hard to really get like a awareness to around the league because this is a top 10 player in theory when he's on the court, but we know he's going to miss time. And so I think that really takes his trade value and cuts it into pieces. So for
Mhm.
this, you're getting a guy in Tyler Hero who's I would say, neutral asset as a contract, but to get a young player like Jovic, just a little bit to add that young core, and then a pick all the way out in 2030, that's 6 years from now. That's kind of like that low hanging fruit that maybe in 6 years, Kawhi won't be in the NBA. Probably he'll be retired by then. He'll be in his late 30s. And then Jimmy Butler will
Guaranteed.
probably not be around either in Miami's outlook. So you look at that move and it's just like, okay, an additional pick, a young player, and then someone right now in Tyler Hero, still a good starter. So that's my first mock trade. And it's just for me trying to get the most out of the Jimmy Butler era because it feels like we're in the last part of it. And this is kind of like Miami's last year of really trying to contend. So what better way to do so than to get someone like Kawhi who immediately becomes their best scorer and solves a lot of problems?
The question we have to go through, though, is what's more important, trying to capitalize on the Jimmy Butler era or best position Bam's era as we
Mhm.
get into the thick of his prime? Because Miami's going to be in position in a year or two from now to trade stars. I believe they have pretty much all their picks. Miami obviously has the cachet, they got the ethos. People want to go to Miami. So,
Mhm.
I mean, we're looking at, for example, Milwaukee. Giannis is already kind of laying seeds out that he might request a trade if they don't win the
Yeah.
championship this year.
Mhm.
And obviously, Miami's been in the Giannis rumors forever. Is it worth going all in for a Kawhi Leonard who's just incredibly unreliable? Or is it better to
Right.
just say, you know what, we'll see whatever we get out of this Butler era? Probably not going to win a title out of it, but maybe 1 year from now or 2 years from now, we'll get somebody in a big trade. That's what I'm kind of thinking for
Right.
Miami.
Yeah, trading for Kawhi is a pure dice roll. That's what it feels
I
like.
would not touch
Now,
that. Second CBA paying Kawhi, what is it, 50 million? No, no.
yeah, it's a lot of money, but the Heat have a lot of contracts they can move around too, luckily. Now,
That's
you have a
true.
mock trade as well, and I actually saw it before. I took a sneak peek. It's pretty interesting. I'll
Heated.
break it down.
This one might not be the sexiest on the surface for a team like New Orleans because there's only one big name in this trade. It's Brandon Ingram. And
Mhm.
I have, in this particular scenario, him getting shipped off to Brooklyn. And essentially, the whole trade looks like Ingram and Jericho Sims, the Knicks' 14th, 15th man, getting traded to the Nets for money purposes. The Knicks getting Dorian Finney-Smith, and the Pelicans getting Bojan Bogdanovic, Mitchell Robinson, and a Knicks second-round pick. So what I'm thinking about in this deal is New Orleans is in a weird financial situation
Mhm.
because they're kind of paying a lot of B-plus players a
Right.
lot of money. So it's kind of in that like, Vikings situation 5 years ago when we just kept paying all the B-plus guys too much money. And, you got DeJounte, you got Zion, you got CJ and Ingram.
A
Just
lot.
it's the battle of mid. So now you ship off Ingram because you can't afford him, and
Mhm.
he's on a 1 year contract. And in return, would you agree that the Pelicans have the worst center rotation in the league right now? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Tice seems like he's their locked-in starter, so
Yeah, and I like Evis
not great.
Missy, but we all know he's only
Mhm.
played
He's a raw
basketball for 4 years.
prospect.
Yeah, he's a good prospect. He's not ready now. So
Mhm.
we're getting a real center in this deal. We get Mitchell Robinson, a rim protecting five, and also another floor spacer with Zion. You can't have too many floor spacers,
Mhm.
Bojan Bogdanovic, and a second round pick just because. And for the New York Knicks, you're flipping Mitchell Robinson for Dorian Finney Smith. So what you're saying is we're kind of redundant at center. We got Cat at the five. In this scenario, you're saying Cat is the five. You're not moving him to the four next to Robinson. He's the guy at the five. And we want somebody more reliable, somebody who can defend and shoot in this rotation. Because even though they seem to have every 3-and-D wing everybody in the league wants,
Yeah.
it still feels like they could use one more, which is funny. So you go and bring in Dorian Finney-Smith, and you just trust Precious as your backup center. So that's what you're thinking for the Knicks. You can have kind of flexibility. Either you want to put Josh Hart on the bench or you put Dorian Finney-Smith on the
Mhm.
bench. You have optionality there. And for the Nets, I mean, you get two expiring deals. Brandon Ingram in this deal is an expiring deal, and this is an audition. If Brandon Ingram kills it, extend the guy. If he doesn't, then you can have the option to keep him or not keep him. And I promise you, Brandon Ingram won't be the difference between a high pick and a low pick. I promise you. So I don't think there's much risk in this trade for the
Right.
Nets. And I think for the Knicks and Pelicans, you're kind of getting better fits, and for the Pelicans, maintaining some flexibility.
Mhm. I love this move for the Nets because from a value perspective, you're basically just flipping Dorian Finney-Smith and Brandon Ingram, right? Like Boyan doesn't have a whole lot of trade value because of his injuries and his age and whatnot. But my one question that's is, okay, it is true that Brandon Ingram's not going to make you go from a 20 to a 31 team, but he still does make you a better team and a more competitive one at that. In a year where your main goal is just being as bad as possible, developing a lot of raw, inexperienced players that you've taken in past years in the draft. And so it feels like despite Ingram being 27, still a kind of young player, he doesn't necessarily fit that timeline of where the team's trying to trend to. But at the same exact time, if you get that type of value, you can't really decline that trade at all because you're not going to get more value in return for a guy like DFS. And I think Brandon Ingram is a little bit underrated right now just because of the injuries and the fit in New Orleans. He's been an underappreciated player, but his skill set's something that serves every single team. And I think a change of scenery would actually help him play better and specifically bring a little more on the defense side of the ball. I feel like Brandon Ingram lacks the intensity of many of these star players that takes you from, say, like a low-end all-star to like a bona fide star. So I think him kind of getting a coach who can really light a fire underneath him, that can make him a better player. And so it could be interesting seeing him in a new spot soon.
And I think the funniest part of this trade is Ben Simmons and Brandon Ingram on the same basketball team because the 2016 NBA draft, they went top 2. So for the Nets, maybe this is a scenario too where Ben Simmons doesn't stink at basketball and his back is healthy. And they say, you know what, we're already middling. Let's just lean into the mediocrity and let's get Brandon Ingram. There's a lot of ways, right, you can see this working for the Nets. And, you said maybe another option works. And I think this is one of those drafts. We know the lottery standing. It's really – there's a lot of parity. It doesn't really matter if you're the 4th worst team or the worst team when it comes to getting your flag. It's like a 1.5% difference. So what you're saying is we're maintaining those odds. And you know what? Let's just say we draft Ace Bailey or Cooper Flagg. They're going to come in and they'll have, if they keep Brandon Ingram, a guy who is going to provide some of that relief. But then also – if they don't want to keep Ingram, he doesn't have to stay because now the Nets suddenly have a ton of money in free agency because they flipped Dorian Finney-Smith and they got an expiring deal. So,
yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a good chance that Ingram gets moved at the deadline this year, but the exact team's tough to pinpoint because he is a specific player that you have to kind of tailor your offense and your entire lineup around. So if you're going to make that midseason type of splash, the Pelicans have some desperation. If things aren't going well with Misi and Daniel Tice, they're going to need to make a trade for a center. And I think that Mitchell Robinson with Boyan's a decent return for BI, given he's expiring, but at the same exact time, I think finding the right home for BI is going to be the biggest problem. And maybe that could be a place like Brooklyn. Now we're going to segue into our second topic, talking about some rookies. Some guys have been showcasing some good things so far in preseason. Do you want to start us off?
Yeah, John, that's right. Like I said, we're going to be kind of flipping on topics sort of like this. We'll put a relative emphasis on some of the rookies on this show. We'll talk about college basketball. We'll talk about some draft in addition to some of the modern NBA topics. And, with Riv, we're going to have some pretty special segments with him. It's too bad he couldn't get on the show today, but he will going forward. But, yeah, I think this 2024 draft, everybody said it's the worst since, 2000? And it's gotten a lot of backlash, but I've always thought it was a deep draft. Maybe the number one pick isn't as definitive. Maybe those guys at the top need to go to the right team, but I think it's a really deep class, and I think preseason and summer league have showcased it. I want to start at the top of the draft. Zac Risacher in Atlanta, I think 2 games, he's played 2 solid games. We don't really see European wings go number 1 overall in the draft. He's kind of a first of an archetype, an off-ball wing, because in Europe, the players who have the ball in their hands are point guards and centers. It isn't a give your wing the ball and let him cook. It's just a different style than American basketball. So there's a lot of ideas of Versace, but what is he outside of a 3-and-D player? And I think he's shown he's got really good connective instincts. He's got an ability to attack closeouts. If you need him to be a movement shooter, if you need him to go in transition, he just looks like a really, really impressive complementary player. Some Michael Porter Jr. in his game, and some Denny Avdia. I think he's kind of a cross between those two. Not the sexiest names, but if he can put it together, he could be a really good complementary player in this league. And he showcased that game 1. And in game 2, even though he didn't shoot well from 3, he shot fine from the field and was still a positive. And I think at the end of the year, he's going to be pretty easily the starter on Atlanta, even with DeAndre Hunter on the roster.
Right. I absolutely love that. And It's huge for the Hawks because they spent so many years trying to find a good wing to pair alongside Trey. It was first Cam Reddish, it was DeAndre Hunter, and throughout all of those years, injuries plagued each of those guys. And when they made this pick to take Zac Risacher, it was kind of like a shock, like, all right, what does he really bring to the table? But as you highlighted, it is that perfect mesh of passing, off-ball chops, being able to shoot the three ball well, being a very good defender on the ball. And then he has the tools to be a little bit more than just your stereotypical 3-and-D player, to where
Mhm.
he can kind of be that like crossbreed of a Denny Advia who brings a little bit of ball handling to the table. And he's not taking enough threes to me. I think him becoming a more willing shooter and not being as reluctant would be a key part of him
Mhm.
kind of expanding what he can be in the NBA in terms of like a production standpoint. Goes 3 or 4 from 3. If he gets up to 7.5 3-point attempts by like his prime, I think we're talking about a guy who could be one of the best shooters in the NBA, both from volume and efficiency standpoint. But then defensively, I think he can easily be like a number 2 defensive stopper on a team. I don't know about number 1, but for Atlanta, they've been searching for that for so long. We're seeing a little bit of that with Dyson Daniels they brought in, but I think Zach is going to be the first player to really elevate him along Jalen Johnson the right ways.
No, I'm with you, and I think I've always been high on Atlanta this year. I've picked them to make the playoffs, and I think that's because that Atlanta has a more bankable structure around Trae Young, kind
Yeah.
of in that old mid 2010s Houston Rockets style where you have the
Mhm.
heliocentric playmaker, then you just put them around size, floor spacing wings, and lob threat bigs. And I think that Atlanta's done that. And
Mhm.
I think because Versace will be good right away and Jalen Johnson, Versace is not Paolo. He's not Zion. He's not Ant. He's not Victor. And I don't think that's should be an insult. Those are pretty fantastic young players. And if you look at the history of the NBA, more often than not, like you're more likely to get a DeAndre Ayton than you are to get a Victor. That's
Mhm.
just you look at the history number one picks. More often than not, they're not legendary players. So if you get a double in this draft where there wasn't a clear cut guy who fit, because Reece Shepard's my favorite prospect, but you can't put him next to Trey.
Mhm.
So, I don't think it was a bad pick at all. And I think he's going to be a good player for Atlanta, which, we saw Bridges get traded for 5 firsts and OG 210 million. I think Versace
Exactly.
would be worth that type of value.
Right. Every team in the league starting to covet these players, and that's what we saw this postseason. The teams with the best supporting cast, like Boston, Denver, specifically on their title run, the Thunder, the Mavericks, those are the ones that are separating themselves from just the other teams with great star players, but not a good complementary cast. I want to talk about a rookie who I think could be the rookie of the year. And this is not really a surprise because he is the odds on favorite right now. That is Zach Edey in Memphis. He's played in a good amount of the preseason games so far, and each night we've seen a little bit more that he's been expanding after his time at Purdue. He seems to be in better shape, better conditioning, which at his size is going to be absolutely critical because in the NBA it's way more pick and roll and spread heavy to where you have to cover more space. But Memphis is putting the pieces around him as well to maximize what he does on offense, but at the same exact time, kind of shielding him as best they can defensively. And the game that really stood out to me, 19 minutes versus the Pacers, drops 23 points, and it felt like every single time he had Isaiah Jackson on him in the post, I mean, he was disarming him with ease. The touch in the in-between space was something that really stood out to me in college and something that's continued to translate to the NBA. At that size, if you put a small on him, he's going to punish them consistently. And then I think the other part of the Grizzlies offense is that so much pick and roll with John Morant trying to get downhill. I think he can emulate the same exact play style that Steven Adams brought as a screen setter. The rebounding is, I mean, Steve-O is a top 3 rebounder arguably in the NBA when he was healthy. So like that's going to be, a pretty big question to see if Edey can replicate some of that. But in terms of how they're going to utilize him in the half court, I think Edey's going to play a lot of minutes in the regular season, and he's going to produce a whole lot. There's going to be nights where John misses time and maybe Desmond Bane's out the lineup, and they're going to go to Zach Edey offensively, and he's going to give them consistent offense out the post. I think that's a real thing. Maybe it's not going to be something you rely on. It won't be night to night. But Zach Edey does bring a skill set that's very valuable in the NBA on the offensive side. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he averages maybe 13 points, 10 rebounds, which
Yeah.
in his rookie class, that would probably be enough to get you in the top 3 of the award.
I'm with you. And it's funny because I never understood why the entire world was worried about Zach Edey. I think we
Mhm.
have this habit as basketball fans where we kind of see the trends of what works in the NBA,
Yeah.
that we just think every player has to fit that mold or they fail. I mean, I remember like the small ball bias a couple years ago where it's like, you can't have 2 7-footers anymore. And I'm like, basketball, big people win in basketball. You're closer to the hoop. It's not crazy logic. Zach
Minnesota
Edey
showed
is
us.
7'5".
Yeah.
He's 7'5". And people were just like, well, I don't care. He's the most dominant player in college basketball. I don't care. It's like, he's 7'5", and he's and he's durable, and he can play. He's got crazy stamina. Because usually they're like the Marjanovic types, where they play like 10 minutes and they can't play anymore because of their body. He can play 30 minutes a game. We saw that at Purdue. So we're talking about a 7'5" guy with touch, with size, with rebounding presence. He's only played basketball a few years. He's gotten better every year. You don't take that bet in the lottery. It was funny because it was like Memphis made the right pick, and I think they're showcasing that.
At first, I was shocked by it because I did not think he would go in the lottery based off of the way that other people talked about him. So it did catch me off guard. But the more you've seen him in, these preseason games and kind of just reflecting on how his very unique skill set can translate to the NBA, it's like many times we tend to, like you just said before, fixate on what the new meta is. But last year, the meta was kind of broken with what Minnesota showed us and even Denver to an extent, right? Like Nikola Jokic is a 6'11" center who's running an entire offense. And that's something we've really never seen before, right? Like the only time that maybe you could use that comparison is Bill Walton, maybe. Even then, a completely different style center. So I think for Memphis, this is someone who maybe he'll be out the lineup in some matchups. Maybe in a certain playoff series, he only plays 15 minutes a game. But generally, he's going to be so valuable this year. And honestly, I think it is probably the player that people were most wrong about going to the draft. But there's one other player that I felt like slipped quite a bit. I'll talk about next, who I feel the same exact way about.
Give me a hint on the person you're mentioning, because there's two different ideas.
Reminds me of a certain Serbian player. I think he's Serbian. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to mention Ryan Dunn then. Now I know the person he's not talking about. So I'm going to talk about Ryan Dunn here because this is a guy who shot 20% from 3 in college and then all of a sudden turned into prime Klay Thompson in preseason.
Right.
Like that does, I don't know if I've ever seen that before. And it's one of those things, usually you shouldn't buy into sudden efficiency increases because those aren't sustainable. But what makes me sold on this is the volume in which he's shooting it. In college, he barely shot attempt a game in college from 3. And now he's shooting over 5 attempts a game in preseason, 6 when he plays a decent amount, and he's making over 40% of them. That's usually a good indicator of this guy can shoot a little bit because Mike Budenholzer, a very smart offensive mind, is allowing him to shoot. And he's still playing lockdown defense, and he's hitting open shots. And you think of the next Herb Jones, and I look at Ryan Dunn, and Herb Jones also had a late bloom as a shooter. And I'm kind of thinking Ryan Dunn's going to follow that path. And we've talked about the Suns needing a lot of more of those complementary role players. But if they got the next Herb Jones right away, that might make Phoenix very, 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 very dangerous. So I think Ryan Dunn is a very important trend, even in the landscape of the entire West as a rookie, which is very weird to say for a 28th overall pick.
Yeah, he's going to be a total X factor if that 3-point shot is something he's consistently taking, right? Like I'm turning on their game versus the Nuggets. He's going to take 11 threes. And I'm like, I did not expect this whatsoever. But like you say, it looks confident. The form looks compact. There's nothing like wrong with the shot mechanically. And when you look at him taking transition pull-up threes, it's like, hold on. That is absolutely unbelievable because I think that's something that really can sustain him, at least having the confidence to. And that's usually the key for these like defense first wings who have a lot of the tools and the makeup to be really useful, especially in the playoffs. Like this Phoenix team needs someone badly at the point of attack with some of their other guys aging. So for him to be a confident offensive player, let alone maybe not the most efficient, but aggressive and assertive, that's going to be a key part of him staying on the floor. And yeah, I mean, I would be pretty surprised based off of this 5-game sample if he's super efficient as a rookie. I just want to see a little bit more, but at the same exact time, it's a great sign. The player who I was talking about, I was hinting at him reminding me of Bogdan Bogdanovic because his play style is really reminiscent of him, who is pretty certain Serbian player. But Dalton Knecht is someone who coming to the draft I thought should have been a lock into the top 10 because of his age, And really just like I think part of a stereotype, like guys like him that are really like these versatile shooters, but maybe not the best defensively, they tend to fall a little bit in the draft. But in a draft class like 2024, to get yourself an elite movement shooter who has good off ball chops and knows how to play, even with the ball in his hands, run a little bit of pick and roll and play off the dribble. It's a skill set the Lakers have needed a little bit more of, along with Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell. And we saw that in their most recent preseason game that he played in versus Suns, 35 points. And he's taken 13 threes in these games. I think we're looking at one of the best shooters in the NBA. Maybe not immediately, but by the end of his rookie year, I would not be surprised if he is taking 7 to 8 3-point attempts, something high up there and making about 37% of them. And really, that's what you're going to need a lot more of to pair alongside LeBron and AD, because what I'm expecting for JJ Redick is for him to utilize Anthony Davis more as a hub. That's going to mean a lot more actions with him in a two-man game, and to have 3 shooters on the floor opposed to 2, where last year they had Cam Reddish starting alongside LeBron and AD. I think the offense and the makeup of how the Lakers organize and structure their offense this year, it's going to be way better. And it's really, to me, the perfect fit for him to play for a guy like JJ Redick, who spent so much time in the NBA as this shooter. Sure, doesn't have a whole lot of coaching experience, but I think he can really emulate some of the things that he used in his playing days for shooters like Knecht. So that's someone who I'm also pretty confident in being in the Rookie of the Year race. And I would be shocked if he's not starting by the end of the year for this Lakers team. I think he can. And then you have Rui Hachimura as a 6-man. It makes a lot of sense, and he is very NBA ready.
He's got this it factor that we saw at Tennessee last year too. He has a very he just relishes big moments. And look, the preseason isn't a big moment, but when that's your first real opportunity to play clutch time late, I don't care if you're a preseason player or a regular season player. When you're new to the NBA, that's no different. You're like, holy crap, I'm in the NBA. And he just took over that overtime. And I like that Bogdanovich comp. I haven't really thought about that. I've always kind of compared him to like a diet Devin Booker. So I like the Bogdanovich comp a lot.
Right.
And as you mentioned, he playing off of JJ Redick, and he's going to get him open shots and motion, and he's playing off of LeBron and AD and their playmaking versatility. I think he's going to score right away, which is kind of what he has to do as a first-round pick at the age of 23, but I think he's going to live up to that. And you know what? Shout out to Dalton Knecht, because I found out 2 days ago he's from Fargo, North Dakota. So you know what? He's my new favorite player in the NBA right now. So I never thought I would do this, but I might buy a Laker jersey with Dalton Knecht on it for that reason. And I'm a Laker hater. So,
and I've got to mention this, but 20 straight points is pretty insane. But I believe with the skill set that he brings, he can score and punches consistently. And maybe another comp is like Grayson Allen and what he was this last year for the Suns. But Knecht to me has more off the dribble chops and a higher feel for the game, where he's not just like a specialist as a shooter. He is a real offensive piece, and someone who I think kind of profiles perfectly as a 4th to 5th option offensively. And for the Lakers, that's exactly what he would be. So it really is a good fit. And I just can't believe he fell to pick 16.
17?
I'll double check right now. There are 4 or 5 different teams that I felt really should keep keened in on him who didn't. And I believe they're going to regret that decision.
Which are those teams?
Let me pull up the draft board for you right now so I can give you a okay. I'll come back to it in a second. Give me a moment.
Okay, I just want to see this ranking, because this is our last player we're mentioning for this Rookie of the Year.
He was the 17th pick. The teams that I think are going to regret the decision. Number 1, to me, I think it's going to be the Sixers. Pick 16, Jeremy McCain did recently just get hurt. So that is like a player who I think is not going to translate as well into the NBA as Knecht. I think Dalton has like a more complete game.
And he's bigger.
And then the other pick that I kind of am not super confident in working out, it's someone that you're high on. It's Cody Williams in Utah. I think Knecht at that number 10 spot would have been a better option. And if Cody does flame out, he reminds me a little bit of Zaire Williams. I think he's a better prospect.
I think he's more complete than Zaire
Williams vibes.
Yeah.
I think Knecht's going to be a better NBA player for sure at the same exact spot.
I don't mind thinking that Knecht's be better than Cody. Zaire Williams, outside of Azubuike going 27 in 2020, is like one of the most WTF picks I've ever had watching the draft. Like, I didn't get it. I didn't get it at the time. Same with the Josh Primo pick, and
Right.
he turned out to be a creep, which is why that pick didn't work out.
Mhm.
But 10th overall, we're talking about. I think Cody Williams at one point was a projected top 2 pick, and
Yeah.
he's got all the talent and he's got
Yeah.
all the versatility. I just think he's a better player than Zaire. I just thought Zaire. I watched him at Stanford, and I was like, this guy is not a first round pick. Did
Right.
he go 10 for the vibes? I mean, I don't. I think they watched
Yeah.
Jaden McDaniels for 1 year and said, let's take this guy 10. He might be
Right.
Jaden McDaniels, and I'm like, nah.
Yeah, no, the Zaire Williams pick was purely vibes based. That was a hope and a dream that they can land a star player one way or the other. So,
And
do
they
you have
got
any other
Desmond Bane
rookies
out
you'd
of
like
it.
to add?
Hmm?
Do you have any other rookies you'd like to add to this?
I mean, there's plenty of rookies. Honestly, we could do an entire hour show. This is theoretically a demo. We didn't do a great job with this demo episode. We're at 32 minutes right now. But
I'm glad. I'm glad we're
yeah,
talking for longer. So,
this might be the theme of the show. We're going to say it's 45, which means it's going to be 65. I'm pretty sure it's going to be like that. But
I'm with that.
there's a lot of rookies that stood out to me. I thought that Tijon Saloon looked more ready than I thought he would. He had a bad game against Indiana, but for a kid who I didn't have as a lottery grade, I thought he was too raw.
Mm-hmm.
He showcased a lot of energy, a lot of intensity. The athleticism and spot up shooting stood out. And think of if he hits, he kind of reminds me of Rashad Lewis. And if he can hit and become a Rashad Lewis in Charlotte, that would be pretty fun because I think Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball, outside of Paolo and Franz, is probably the best young duo in the Eastern Conference. And no, Tatum and Brown aren't young. They're literally entering year 10, people who think about them.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of think of. Yeah, I like Stallone. And then Donovan Clingan, his last game.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was the best pure center in the draft. And he looks like I don't think Ayton is going to be there long. He's hitting spot up threes now. He can obviously kind of play make off the block like Hartenstein can.
Mm-hmm.
He's also an anchor in the paint. He's going to be a stud. I love Clingan. If he's healthy, he's going to be really good. So
absolutely, I like the Hartenstein comp for him too. Donovan Clingan a little bit. If he can consistently add that touch, I think that's a good one. The Tijon Salon is another prospect who was lower on who I've been impressed with. And that's a pick that could really elevate the Hornets because he's coming off their bench. And right now, to me, Charlotte's the most underrated team in the NBA. We could talk about this in another episode, but with LaMelo being healthy, you have Brandon Miller moving into year 2. Not a Miles Bridges guy. I feel like every time I talk about him, I like preface that he's still a really good player that's going to make them a better team. And having him for the entire season as well just adds more on the wings for them. And then Mark Williams going to year 3 too, it can only get better as well. So you look at Charlotte with a new head coach and Charles Lee coming in, kind of expanding and bringing this defensive mindset. And I think an ability to connect with his players on a deeper level. I think these guys are going to look a lot more like they did in 2022 when they're a 43-win team. And they are a sneaky playoff candidate for me in the Eastern Conference this year.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think we've just seen Charlotte be bad for a long time. We just assume that's what they are.
You don't give them the benefit of the doubt. That's what it is.
Yeah, they've been so hurt the past couple of years. I know that's the main reason. The last LaMelo healthy season, they won 43 games, and he's finally gotten the ankle brace. So maybe he's on that Stephen Curry physical trajectory.
I hope so.
Maybe. I still think LaMelo Ball outside of Ant's the most gifted player in that draft, even ahead of Halliburton and Maxey. I'll stand on that. And if he's healthy and Miller remains the clear number 2 guy in the 2023 class and they can get healthy, I actually really like Trey Mann. I think he's one of those, if he just has some confidence, could break out into a 6th man of the year. Right. And there's talent there. It's just the maturity. Are they ready from a maturity standpoint? They might be a year away, but they got talent.
They do, and they have a lot of pieces like Josh Green. They brought in Grant Williams. He's kind of been forgotten in recent years, but Grant is still someone who, at the back end of your rotation, I like a lot for a team like Charlotte. Yeah. And I want to just touch to wrap up here on Donovan Clingan because I think this is insane. In their most recent game, plays 24 minutes, posts 20 rebounds, and was a plus 30 in that game. 4 assists, 4 blocks.
It was nuts.
I really had Alexander Sarr as my number 1 prospect at the time of the draft. Some people may say this is reactionary, but over the last 6 months, the more I've watched Donovan Clingan and really also watching Alexander Sarr too, and the limited stretches that he's played in Summer League, it's become kind of clear to me Clingan's going to be the clearly better player on day 1. I thought that previously, but Clingan still is young too, and I think there's a chance for him to develop into a better version of what he was in college offensively. And in the NBA, I'm starting to get the impression that Donovan Clingan's going to have the better career than Alexander Sarr. So I don't disagree at all with him being the best Bears center in this draft class because I think him and Edey will be the top two ones. And Sarr, to me, skill set is very projection based, and
I don't
he's a
think he's a pure
project.
center though. Like
No,
he's
he's
not.
not. He's not a center. Offensively, he doesn't play like one.
No.
He's really a forward in the center's body. And that's
Yeah.
kind of where I started to think of like Nicholas Claxton comps and stuff like that for him. But that's getting off topic a little bit.
Little Porzingis, a little bit.
Yeah, without the skill set that Porzingis had.
I don't know. I mean, Sar's trying to play like Porzingis. Like in the preseason,
Because he
he's
grew
hitting
up
his
as a wing.
threes. I
So
mean, he wants to be off ball. He wants to set screens and roll. And
Yeah.
he wants to pick and pop and he wants to roll, which is kind of what KP did when he was young. So I think there's some Porzingis there. I think Porzingis was better at the same stage, but I think there's some parallels there.
Definitely. But yeah, I think Donovan Clingan and Zac Risacher are two guys this year that could be at the top of the rookie of the year race, 1 and 2. And long term, they're guys that people need to be higher on as real pieces. But if that is our last rookie, it's going to wrap up this show, I believe. And I guess, yeah, I mean, I haven't recorded a podcast in a while beyond Pick a Side. So I'm really excited to have this going on with you. And honestly, I'm just really happy that the NBA season's here to have something to talk about. It's new and fresh. That's what I'm also super hyped for. But all that being said, I guess I'll wrap up today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to do the show with you as well, John. And when we get Riv on, likely the next episode, that's going to be a thriller. And we're also going to get some other guests on. And the show's going to be a vibe. It's going to be a vibe. It's going to be
Absolutely
pure basketball. And probably when something devastating happens to us in football, we'll mention it in the beginning. But it's going to be mainly basketball. And yeah, it's going to be great. And yeah, we already gave the overview on what the show's going to look like, and we'll just continue to add ideas over time. So we're excited.
We got nothing but heat coming for you guys. So if you enjoyed, be sure to drop a like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.